restricted immediately to redevelopment only. We're not going to take questions about demolition or anything outside of that. Let's keep the questions focused on the redevelopment and more specifically Mr. Tavares' plan. So, Mike, if you'd like to take it away.
Right, thank you, everyone. I just want to first of all introduce you to my core team. I have two lead architects. We have Dale Knapp from Danvers. We have Jerry McNeil from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We have structural engineer Todd Headley from Billerica. We have Kevin Latati from Lexington, and Gregory Camille also from Halifax, Nova Scotia. In the back row is my partner Neil Hiskin, and this couple is Karen and David Baumgartner from Minnesota. They are considering partnering with Neil and I with the Winterwood property, which is part of our long-term vision for the Nichewaug development. Karen and David and Neil and I would eventually stay on in Petersham as long-term residents and continue to operate that facility into the future. So that gives you our core group of people that we've been working with. Many of you have heard and know that I was a resident of this town for most of the 1980s. I owned the house on West Street. Today it's owned by Tom and Michelle Cahill. Next door neighbor was Candace and Tom Anderson, and restored that house and moved on with my life. I've kept my relationships going in Petersham ever since. Through the 80s, I would walk around the Nichewaug and envision the possibilities that could happen for that property. And every time I came back to Petersham, I was really saddened to see that the two people that had ever stepped forward really never materialized. There was no real vision and no long-term plan for it. And so a few years ago, I guess it was 3 years ago now, while I was surfing online looking at houses for sale in Petersham, I noticed that my house on West Street was for sale. So it started to spark my interest in Petersham again. I immediately contacted Chuck, and we started to negotiate for me to buy the house back. Well, then the Cahills came into the world, and they got the house, which I was really happy to hear. But what really came of that was their love for this town. Actually, my love was projected through them in some way because they took the reins for the Nichewaug and started to encourage everyone to start to look at possibilities. And through the efforts of many of you, an RFP was drafted and a call went out to the world on that property. I immediately got a call from Michelle who asked if I would consider stepping forward and put together a plan for the future of the building. At first I was a little shocked, but then I thought, why not? I mean, I think the building has possibility. I certainly had a lot of my own thoughts for the building over those years. When the RFP was released, I came to town in December, at which point I had brought Dale and Kevin with myself, and we went through the building, and we were really surprised to see the condition of that building was absolutely incredible. It's a beautiful building, and you know, people see buildings sometimes and they're dirty, and they think, well, it's dirty, it's old, it's not good anymore. That's one of the newest buildings on this common. And in the scope of the age of buildings, it isn't really that old. And when you get to the institutional building, those buildings are some of the newest buildings in all of town. So, yeah, they've had some years of weather and neglect, but they certainly are strong and plumb and viable. So I started to put together some thoughts, and when I was here in December after the tour, I put together a list of ideas of what I thought that building could be. And what I realized is in order for us to restore it, it had to have a cross-section of uses. It needed to have home ownership. It needed to satisfy the needs of the population, not only in Petersham, but it needed to encourage young people to want to be here. It needed to have some rental property. It needed to have a cross-section of values, high-end to moderate-priced housing, so that we weren't creating an elite ghetto, and we weren't creating a subsidized housing development. We were creating either first-time home ownership for some, or we were creating the next phase of a 55-plus group of people, which, of course, I'm one of those people, where there's a transition into independent living and no more lawns to mow and no more driveways to shovel and none of that stuff. So that became the foundation for my vision for what was a possibility. So then I started to have conversations with many people in town because I didn't want to come up with a dream plan and not listen to what the community needed. This project is going nowhere without the community behind it. This isn't about my dream. It's not about the ability of the talent sitting here. It's about everyone in this community getting together and giving us the tools we need to create a use for that property that is sustainable and that will take it into the future as a member of this community. So in those conversations, we came up with several different uses. We came up with a number of residential units not to exceed 38. 38 was a number that I felt was not going to be overly dense for the center of town, but financially made the project viable. Condominium ownership of 38 units was doable in a 100,000 square foot, 6.5 acre parcel of land. There needed to also be, I felt, a community-based amenities center. And what I mean by that, there's a section of the institutional building where I believe we could create an indoor pool facility, a gym and health club area, a yoga studios, meeting rooms, a conference rooms that people through a membership could actually use the facility to have recreational activities. So that benefits not only the people who live on that community, but it benefits all of us. Everyone in this community can share in that. There's been some conversation that the town is looking to build a new town office space. The office space you presently have, you're kind of breaking out of the seams. And so there's enough space in that development to create a 5,000 square foot state-of-the-art office space for this community. That would be a condominium that you would own, and you'd outfit and build out with our team the way you want it. So those were some of the initial ideas. Then I'm a preservationist. I've done 26 projects. They're all in national landmark districts, and I absolutely stand very firm in honoring the evolution of time in my development. One of the things about the Nichewaug that to me is very important is the common space of the main historic building. The parlors, the sunroom, the music/chapel room, the dining hall, the lobby. Those rooms cannot, and in my plan will not, be shut out of use by anybody in this town. And so in my plan, I want those spaces to be retained and owned by the condominium association so that people in the town could have an event there. There could be movie nights, there could be dance shows, there could be all kinds of community-based things that go on and a fee be charged to support it, but everybody in this community gets to walk in that door and feel a sense of belonging. You don't have to own the space. There's been conversations about a restaurant. And, you know, I have a fine dining restaurant in my inn in Nova Scotia. Does it need to be fine dining? Does it need to be comfort food? There's all kinds of conversations about what's going to be supported. My vision is a condominium that is sold to a restaurateur who has a dining facility available in that space. Now that can serve multiple purposes. General public can go there and have dinner. They can cater an event in the main parlors. They could supply meal service to the senior community who lives in the buildings. There's a lot of opportunities for income generating mechanisms with a food component. Then we got into conversations around respite care services, and that was part of what the Peterson Committee Incorporated had a great idea. And even though they have stepped down from their response, I still firmly believe that there is a place in this project where part of their project fits beautifully within the scope of the community that we're building at the Nichewaug complex. So there were conversations around respite care, there were conversations about day programs, there were conversations about rental units that would have the ability for dual handicap accessibility. Those are all opportunities that we need to further explore. And in our design phase, I don't think we've narrowed it down to any one thing. And these kinds of exercises are really what's important. We need to hear what you want. We need to have everyone's participation in this. And then we need to be able to take it to the bank and get it funded. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about how are you going to fund such an extravagant project. Well, this is a condominium conversion, and it's complete, the complete financial prospectus of this project is funded by the sale of units, whether it be a restaurant or a condominium residential unit or an office to the town or respite service or whatever. These are the spaces that are going to generate the resources that the bank wants to see, and they're going to fund the construction. Now, there are several projects, several programs available in the state of Massachusetts, and I'm going to give you an idea of some of the monies. In every project I have taken on, there's a pot of gold out there for almost every single need when it comes to restoration and adaptive reuse. And in Massachusetts, here are some of them. And we're going to apply to all of them. There's money in there for community development. Community development would be what I was talking about with the main floor. That is a prime example of an adaptive reuse for a community space. There's money in there that supports culture. So if you're using the music room / chapel for movie nights or dances or recitals, there's money available to help support that kind of initiative. There's education money available. In every project I've ever taken on, I bring in young people and I help train them. My life is finite. I can only live so long. If I can teach someone in their 20s how to do something, then hopefully my work doesn't stop with my life. And so there's money available for training where we can bring and enroll young people on our development team to teach them how to actually touch and love a historic building. There's money available for emergency planning. Then we get into the whole thing about respite care or any kind of seniors living on the property. There are services that are going to be needed there for safety. Well, there's money available for that stuff. There's energy money, conservation and renewable technologies. There's all kinds of money available for green development, whether it be heating your water, watering your lawns, even paving your driveways can be done with green technology, where you don't have an asphalt driveway, you have a green driveway. There is a sod that grows in a waffle-type paver stone, and you don't have a blacktop, poisonous ground to walk on. There's money around environment stuff, capturing rainwater, redirecting natural resources. There's monies for Preservation Massachusetts. This property was identified as one of the top 10 endangered historic sites in the state of Massachusetts. And with that comes a pot of gold. We're going to go get a piece of it for Peter Sam. There's there's money about historic preservation, lots of that going on over there. There's money for libraries. There's a need in this community for there to be a link between this project and the public library by way of utility easement. There's been conversation around septic and water services. Well, guess what? There's money in the library sector that could support that kind of easement, whether it be just the legal technology of it, the legal deed conveyance issue. There's money to pay for that stuff. What I'm really excited about is that this project is so noteworthy that it's worthy of a documentary. This project, there are lots of large buildings throughout all America and in Canada that people just don't know what to do with. TV shows like HGTV and some of those networks are making millions and millions of dollars teaching people how to do something. This is an opportunity to put Peterson on the map from how this little town did it right. And with that comes an incredible amount of free stuff. Every supplier, every technology company, everybody that supplies something in building trades of today is going to want to have their name in the credits. That's something that Greg McNeil and I would want to work really closely on because it is an untapped resource, and this building, I believe, qualifies on every aspect. So, that's, in short, our plan.
Did you want to talk a little more about
Yeah, I'm going to,
plan?
yes, I would like to have Todd Headley, who is our structural engineer, talk to the community about his observations today on his walkthrough from the basement of those buildings to the attic. Todd?
For the most part, it's generally in good condition. There are certain areas that we saw that, floors are a little bit saggy. Saggy a little bit. Technical. The roofs, there's some issues with the roofs, but, in general, what I saw, we can preserve it. The foundations are in good shape. Other than that.
Did you see much rot or anything in the beams, and how are the sills? Did you get that close a look, or?
Yeah, we were in the basement and we walked around on all the floors, and it just, I'd say 5 to 10% of the structure, there's issues, but other than that, we don't have X-ray vision, so,
Yeah.
without opening the walls, we don't know what's there, but from what I saw, 5 to 10%.
Dale, could you chime in on what you said?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that we do, because as you may know, as I'm sure you know, there are multiple buildings that people can sort of see this. So you have the original in here, as well as at the back. This building again was moved to the site as a small piece. So what we saw that's the most deteriorated is actually a link that was built between. It appears quite evident there was a small stretch of building that was added onto the side of that wing, which tied these two buildings together. And if you walk around the back, you see that the tree growing on the roof. There is a small one. But that's where the roof is actually sort of wavering and probably didn't fall down in this heavy snow over this winter, so it has some structural integrity, but it's certainly something that has to be repaired or removed and completely rebuilt. But the main structure within the building, there is one anomaly in the main building at the second floor that is sort of a beam that's protruded, so it's probably a sunken joist on one side or the other. But the ridges of the building are very, true and straight. You don't see sort of, swagging and swaying ridges that is often a sign that there's something else happening. Where we could get in the basement, as everyone is, I'm sure, heard, there is water standing in some of the basement. There's only a small percentage where that's the case. There's a small basement under this front area of the building that is extra low where the water heaters and so on were for the kitchen. There's standing water in there. We were able to get to the joist of the floor above the main floor under that. And while they are damp, they were solid. They're not just a little bit funky on a quarter of an inch or so. But the integrity is there. The building that was moved, the same thing. Things are solid and stable. It seems the sills are tight in that building. And then the middle section here, which is where the office is, that's where there's about 2 feet of water in the basement of that area. We understand it, and it appears to be the case that when it was there and operating as the school, there were probably pumps running continuously. So that's a little bit of an unknown exactly what will have to be dealt with there. It would be pumped out, and there's ways we can monitor, check the reinforcement and the concrete. But since it's been wet and stayed wet, it's probably okay. What really causes rot and rusting is the cycle of rime, you know, it's a combination of water and air. So probably the fact that it got wet and it stayed that way for a number of years, to some extent, there's probably a bit of a preservation there. But, you know, we're not, you know, we're aware that there's a lot of work that's going to have to be developed with that and treating it for, you know, for air quality and so on. But you know, these two buildings in the back in particular, as you know, they're not very old. They're a combination of steel and wood frame and masonry. So there really is a lot of integrity. There are also buildings that are very good skin and shell that can be renovated and changed. You can add partitions, take partitions away. They are not, for the most part, load-bearing walls in the middle. There's a column structure in there that's concealed within the walls. So there's really a lot of flexibility with these buildings in particular to be restored. And then, you know, the front building is going to be much more true of a preservation as opposed to a repair. But again, the attic, fortunately, the roof was repaired on it over the past several years. The attic is completely visible. The wood structure is in good condition, no serious damage there. There is this link here that people are aware of. There was water coming in for some time, but I think it was the town that repaired. So the plaster is all off there and so on. And there's probably some skin in there and bones that have to be repaired. But as Todd was saying, for the overall structure, you know, on a kind of board by board member, there's going to be a few pieces, but the building's not leaning, the stands are straight, the ridges are straight, all of the main components of the building seem to be intact. There may or may not be a little bit, we couldn't see everything because it's crawl space for the sills here, but all of us on our team have done a number of buildings where we've raised things up and replaced the sills. When you think about it as a homeowner, and we've done that on our own homes, it's a monumental task. But on a commercial scale of a project like this, replacing a few sills or replacing a few joists is kind of a routine matter and not something that really has to be at the same time. Yes?
What is the composition and condition of the basement walls? And maybe different in different buildings, but
It is different buildings. This building that was moved is actually fieldstone, laid up with concrete. The original building, most of this is also fieldstone and not that much of it is visible. This piece that was a later addition is concrete block. Again, it seems stable. No major cracking seen here. Right at the front porch, there's one that's just really a site wall, but there is a major cracking. But the rest of the perimeter here, we've not seen any major damage. And the two newer buildings are all concrete up to above grade. And again, all of that looks sound. It's just going to be a little bit confirmed with reinforcing the water.
why can't you see the fieldstone wall?
Well, partly, we did kind of crawl back, partly it's concealed with bushes and so on, so
Oh, I
you
meant-
can see it, but you can't get a great.
Well, I meant from like the basement side.
Most of it, because there's only a crawl space about this high.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's muddy and dirty, so we
Okay.
didn't get all the way back in there.
Okay.
But one of the signs of that is, you know, when you walk along the perimeter edge of the wall,
Yeah.
the joists are not soft, so probably the sills are not.
You don't see any bowing and,
No, they're really, other than this little infill that was done between those buildings, somewhat haphazardly, I'll say, that area, there is that condition. But otherwise, no.
How about the asbestos that exists in the building?
There is asbestos, and there is a report. The majority of the asbestos is vinyl tile, vinyl asbestos floor tile, which is, you know, asbestos, there's two types. There's friable and non-friable. So non-friable basically means it's bound into something like a floor tile. You don't want to grind it and so on, but taking it up and removing it is really not a big deal. And the friable, there is pipe insulation. So that has to be sort of a containment setup. I mean, the floor tile is also taken up under containment. But essentially, you kind of seal up the rooms with plastic. You can do it a piece at a time. In my office in particular, along Kevin was with us a lot, and we do many thousands of square feet a year of basement work. I mean, as a designer.
not to remove that section at all. That was a series of bedrooms, might have been rooms the nuns lived, that's what I was told. In our plan for the use of 55-plus condominium space, we see that as an asset to the development. And so demolition is never a first choice in historic restoration. We throw enough stuff away in this world, and I think what we need to start to do is start to reuse more things. So I would be under the impression, unless there was a structural flaw that we couldn't repair, that I would definitely stand against tearing that off. The other thing that's very important in a restoration adaptive reuse is the evolution of time. People sometimes get caught into a mindset with a historic building that they want to bring it back to 1790. Well, in a museum, that's a lovely thing to do, but buildings have passed through time, and so I'm much more under the value of how it progressed through time. For example, our inn in Nova Scotia is an 1880s Victorian mansion, but my 7 guest rooms take you on a journey through time, and the themed rooms date from 1900 to 1960, with our motto saying, tell us which decade you would like to visit and let us take you there, showing you that Victorian house, what it looked like in 1950. That period, and I am not, and I consider myself to be an expert at dealing with old buildings. Who am I to say that the 1950s of that 1870s house are not as important as its 1890s time period? So, even with that, we've had this conversation about the school buildings, the institutional buildings, and there were some people who said to us in the beginning, "Oh, you should try and reface them and make it look like it belongs to." It does belong. It belongs from 1952, and that doesn't mean that we can't add modern windows and modern features to it, but that part of its history, its parochial its contribution during its parochial service was a very important point in its history that we do not want to see lost. So we won't be doing that in any case that we can help it.
That wing that's nearest to the library, if you consider the context of the inn, and then the addition of that wing, and it's coming so close to the library, I think there are those who would argue that that was a mistake, and that it could well be removed, and it would benefit both the library and the inn.
We walked that really closely today, and yes, that wing does sit on the property line, but it is not too close to the actual library building. If you look at the houses that line the common right now, they're closer in some cases than the Nichewaug wing and the library wall is. So my argument would be that maybe it was bad planning, maybe there should have been more of a setback requirement in 1952, but it's there. And again, I don't think we, and I as a developer, do not want to clog landfills with any more garbage than we already have in them. So I feel that that square footage is important to the project, and I think they did a very tasteful job when they added it on. It was a very sensitive addition. It wasn't like it was just an add-on that didn't make any sense. It really did, they really were very sensitive to the historic building.
If we were talking about community involvement and support for this, and suppose there were some community support for removing that wing, if they felt that visually, even though you can say, well, it's within so many feet, and the house next door is within so many feet, what have you, would you negotiate with the community on that?
If it came down to a financial, and I gotta be honest, I'm not really heavily motivated by financial stuff with this, but if it was only a conversation about financial, there would be a conversation. Now, I think there could be a compromise. I think there could be some aesthetic things that could be thought about, and we would definitely, all of us would be willing to work very closely. In fact, our final development team is going to be made up of people from the community. So we want that involvement, but I think there has to be a real conversation about wasting things and throwing things away. When we talk about our planet and the environment, we really do start to need to think about how we can repurpose. And I don't think that, I think if we're talking aesthetics, absolutely. If we're talking about ripping 25, 30 feet off of a building, that's going to be a really hard sell for someone like me, to be really honest with you. I'd like to maybe have Mr. McNeil speak to you about historic properties. He's an expert in dealing with historic properties, and maybe you could address that conversation.
We should really take this.
Okay.
As Michael said, I think it's a matter of what was there in the timelines. You can remove it, and then you're also left with a hole and you're erasing time that really it never returns to it. We're never going to return to the Model T car. We're never going to return to the horse and buggy or time without penicillin. And that is an active part of the history of this town. And I think myself to leave it in place is actually the appropriate decision.
I think it's important too that we identify. We're going to give you a little show. In fact, Greg is going to show you a little marketing tool that we're going to use. But I'd like to touch base on how we see this project coming together. If you can't finance it, you can't save it. So in my job, if I can't make the numbers work, it's not going to work. This project we see as 3 phases. We see the far back institutional building being phase 1. And the reason is, it's the least expensive building to restore and adapt to new purpose with the highest return for that effort. That helps to finance the next phase. Banks get very comfortable when projects start to have a lot of equity piling up. So phase 1 being the back yields the biggest return to the development, makes phase 2 much easier, which leads you right into phase 3. So phase 1 being the back and say the Nichewaug being phase 2 makes the amenities section phase 3 very doable, because now you've got an income stream to support that use. So our long-term plan, and it would be 15 to 18 months, is maybe a little bit aggressive, maybe 2 years to do the whole project, would be done in phases. And it doesn't mean we would neglect the front building at all. There would be a lot of things that would be happening for the front building. But our focus would be on following the money. The banks are going to want us to follow the money. Selling condominiums back there, building space out of that building is going to be a very simple thing with a high return. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the tax benefits this project is going to yield for this town. Because it is 100% condominiums, we're talking about creating 38 residential tax accounts to this town. We're talking about 20 to 25 covered parking spaces that are condominiums. You can buy a covered parking space. That comes with a tax account. There's a master deed tax account. There's a restaurant tax account. There are amenities spaces that all come with tax accounts. We estimate this town will gain 66 new tax accounts. Your municipal planning strategy back in 2007 or 2009 stated this town's goal was to issue 7 building permits per year over a 7-year period. And from what I know, I think we're at 5. You've given 5 permits.
Mike, is there a financial value associated with the 66 new tax accounts in your estimation?
Well, based on your tax rate, and say you've got a unit worth $200,000, roughly $250,000 a year would immediately ripple into this town's annual income forever. something you can't dispute. That's actual facts. So we really need to look at how do we try and grab that opportunity. So I was saying, the town is years behind its municipal plan, which was to issue 7 new building permits a year. And you've issued about 5 that I know of in that time. So what does that mean? It means that you're struggling, and I sat in this room in the 80s and struggled whether we were going to give the teachers a raise or buy a new fire truck one year. And I know what it meant to my tax bill, and I know what you people are faced with in this town. This project enables this town to have services that you never dreamed possible. And if you throw it away, you're going to have a 20-year bill to pay off the demolition. So when we look at this development, I want you to see it as opportunity. What could this town do with $200,000+ a year in new tax money? You wouldn't be sitting here wondering if you could give your teachers a raise anymore. You wouldn't be wondering, can we afford the broadband setup and how much is that going to cost us? These things will just be able to happen. And it's not going to hit every single one of you. So that's the real benefit. So again, in preservation, in development, we follow the money. In the phases of the development and in the long-term sustainable economic benefits to the town.
How much do you figure each condominium will cost?
This is a good question, because I want this to be available to everyone. So we decided that, what I did was I got a demographic study offline that showed me not only the town, but the region's demographics. Age, race, income, the time you've owned your house, what the equity base is in the community as a whole, drive time to and from work, all of those demographics. And what we determined was that there are people in this community that would want to have a high-end condominium, who have lived a significant lifestyle, who have lived in a grand old house, who have made a very comfortable living, who are not going to want to sacrifice the quality of this next phase of their life. So there would be a couple of units, and I estimate 3 maybe, that would be upwards to $350,000 to $400,000. But then the majority of the units that we see would be somewhere between $250,000 and $175,000. And when you look at those based on, especially current interest rates, that's very affordable for the average person. Now, there'll be some units, in my plan, I want the condo association to own 6 of the units and rent them. So there'd be income property for the homeowners association. Now, the homeowners could sell them in the future if they so chose to, but in the development, we want to hold the homeowners association, everyone who owns a unit there, would have a partnership in, say, 6 of those apartments. Those apartments can be rented. You've got a new development going in, the Hayward Hospital. They're looking for rental housing. There are people in this town who may not want to own a house anymore, may want to rent a quality home. There'll be rental space available there. So now we've got the high-end buyers, the mid-range average buyer, average price range buyer, and we've got the person who wants to live independently and pay a fair rent and live in a nice space. So nobody's excluded. That creates a stable residential community.
Would the price factor also have to do with square footage, not necessarily?
Price is pretty much based on square footage. So the price per square foot, depending on what we've been finding out, and we've got a little bit of it's hard because there's not a lot of new construction to base those kinds of numbers on, but based on a price per square foot, our unit sizes that we've been talking about are between, say, 800 square feet and 1,500 square feet. Very, very comfortable, decent spaces.
Can you tell me how much the condominium fees would be?
Well, the condominium fees will be determined once the homeowners association budget is formed. But in the condominium association fees, that fee is going to include your electricity. It's going to include your common area tax bill. It's going to include all management and maintenance services. The average bill will probably run between $350 to $450 a month. And the average person who lives in an average home pays more than that. So if we can keep your monthly homeowners association fee under $500, that's what it's costing the average person to live in their own home, have their TV and their high-speed internet and their electricity, and you'll have your tax bill, which is a separate bill, but you'll have a common area tax bill that you'll all share it. So that would be the monthly expense. The HOA is around, let's say $500 would include everything, except your personal mortgage and your insurance and fees.
So does that include the
Yes.
You mentioned preserving the original structure, and of course, from an historic district commission perspective, that's something that would be very favorable. It also is part of, it's a key part of the character of the town. It really is the centerpiece of the town. And so that part's great. But is there any thought of preserving some of the interior, which is very period and has historic value?
What we've determined and what we've seen, the entire main floor will be completely restored in the Nichewaug. Everything will be completely restored. In the units in the Nichewaug building, all that we really see of any real historic value are the fireplace mantels, maybe some interior doors. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a 1x3 pine casement. It's not a lot of. Now, the flooring systems we found today are beautiful in the entire building. So anywhere we can save the staircase will be preserved. The main lobbies will not change.
Take out the ACT ceiling.
Take out the, yeah. We'll remove that. That layer of time can go to the dump, but, yeah. So the historic integrity of that building is the only way I'll do this project. I actually sat on the historic commission.
And one other thing, we have the sports facility, and one of the things from the Open Space and Recreation Committee that we talked about often is the tennis courts. And
Yes.
if they, would they be renovated
Yes.
as part of this project?
Yes.
Available to towns?
Absolutely. They'll be managed by the amenities facility. So part of your HOA fee would include the indoor pool maintenance and all the use of those facilities. And again, the general public under membership could go there and use all those facilities also. So yes, those are definitely going to be saved.
Would you talk a little bit about your plans for financing? I understand the rollout once you start selling condominiums and the academy building, but how about the initial financing, and what would you expect to pay the town for the property?
We estimated in our answer to this question, the town is looking for a new office space, estimating to be about 5,000 square feet. We estimate raw square footage in that building to be worth about $100 a square foot. We are prepared to give the town 5,000 square feet, which equates out to $500,000 for the Nichewaug building as a whole. Now, the build-out for that would be the responsibility of the town. So, working with our team, engineers, architects, and contractor, the town could then retrofit the space the way they want it. We would supply the infrastructure. So, our contribution is that. Additionally, we intend on entering into an agreement with the library to be able to supply a utility easement for water and septic connections into the Nichewaug. So that's another contribution to the community. And we want the town to hold 2 seats on the development team and the long-term HOA, Homeowners Association, 1 select person and 1 person from the Historic Commission. Initially, the Historic Commission person would be appointed by the development team. Once it's an HOA, it would be an elected position. So our contribution to the town is that.
So basically, the town would give you the land in exchange for having so many square feet.
5,000 square foot of
5,000
buildable
square feet
office space.
available for them to develop out of our own pocket.
That's right.
And then the financing for the work you would begin to do on the Academy building would come partly from the library, but from where else?
I read out there are 9 funding opportunities that we're going to explore.
You don't have any money available, you have to go out and get money.
There's nobody in the world that is going to show up in this town with a bucket of money and build your building for you. I'm not being disrespectful. This has got to be creative. It has to take advantage of every financing opportunity, every grant opportunity out there, and there are a number of them. That's what we do, is go and get that money by pre-selling units. Once we reach a certain percentage of units for each phase, the bank will finance the remainder and it will close the deal. The property now has a significant amount of equity built in from phase 1. That money then leans over to phase 2, and it ripples into phase 2, and it closes with phase 3.
How about parking?
There are, our plan is that we are going to create a covered parking facility. Ideally, what we want to do is acquire Winterwood. Winterwood sits on 4+ acres. 2 acres of that would be subdivided and added to the Nichewaug. On that 2 acres, we would build a carriage house. There would be 25 covered parking spaces for sale to any of the residents on the property as a condominium. There's your indoor parking. All the parking for this facility will be behind the building. So when you drive up this drive right now on the north side of the property, and you get past that 3-bay garage, there's a huge space in there. That's going to be some green parking there for the amenity center, the restaurant, and the function space. There's a big space there. Along both sides of the institutional building, on the north side and around the back side on the southwest, and along the western wall, are going to be parking spaces all the way around that building, all done in green technology. There'll be no parking on the common. There'll be no parking in front of the Nichewaug except for loading and unloading.
Quantify parking.
Well, code will do that, and zoning's going to do that. So in some cases, some municipal regulations say 1.5 parking spaces per residential unit.
You haven't done that calculation.
Well, that's part of our zoning application. We have to determine.
I went through it, and based on what I could understand of your proposal and the types of use and the current zoning regulations of this town, it came out to something like 324 spaces.
I can't imagine where you got that number, sir. How can you possibly have been that high?
It's a big building. You read the code.
Occupancy is the issue.
I know.
And if you've got 38
If I
residential...
take the proposal that you made, apply the same areas to it, same uses, you get 194 spaces. So I just want to see your calculations, and I would love to see a site plan that puts all this stuff on the ground,
You're
deals
asking,
with the limitations of reality.
you're asking questions that relate to design of the entire complex. There are 2 very big issues here. One issue is town zoning and requirements based on use and occupancy. That's something that has to be discussed. The number you're coming up with, I have no idea where that came from, and I'm not going to question you on that. That is an outrageous number. We are not building a parking lot here. 38 residential units, a 40-seat restaurant, and an amenities building with transient use is nowhere near 100, even 100 spaces.
You go through the town regulations, and do the calculation, and let's see the site plan.
I'm sure we'll be getting to that point. I'm positive we'll get to that point.
And as a town member, I think it's important not to lose perspective. The overall picture is the town has a problem. it's been earmarked as the most dangerous building in town. And we're not really talking any other option, but any other option besides having a creative developer come to town is gonna cost the town hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So this is his time to share with us his vision, and I personally applaud, what you're doing and your creativity.
Thank you.
He's right. In our zoning bylaw, there is a provision that if you do that kind of calculation, you do wind up with 300+ parking spaces.
Right,
As they discovered at 211 North Main in that application.
okay.
But the zoning board of appeals looked at it and said, but there are 3 ways to calculate. And we'll choose this one here, and it'll come up with some more reasonable number.
That's right.
So he's fundamentally correct, but the
And I'm not-
problem lies in.
Right, and I'm not questioning his math, but we're talking about is a concept from an entire adaptive reuse that needs to be explored, and there needs to be the gray area. Where do we fall? What do we have to do to fulfill the parking requirements? Clearly, we understand where this gentleman is coming from. There needs to be a gray area somewhere, and we're not even close to that point.
What challenges will the water and septic pose?
From what, does someone want to address that question?
Well, we've been looking at the reports that the town has done, and we don't have a civil engineer fully engaged in working on that. We know we will need a new septic system, we'll need the reserve area, and the water, obviously, will be added some push to the building as well, so there have to be some storage tanks and so on. Again, it may relate to acquiring the land next door, so it is a big question that's not resolved, but it's not unlike we faced in a number of other projects.
This problem has happened since 1985. That has been that problem with that property. When it first came on the market and I looked at that property, the issue we had was septic. In fact, in 1985, when I looked at that property, the Quabbin people came out the day we went for our inspection. They went in the building and they flushed red dye down the toilet. And within 2 minutes, it was in the storm drain. They pulled the meters off, shut the water off on that building, and I don't think it's ever been turned back on. So that's always been a problem, the septic issue. Now, rough calculations show that 40,000 square feet is needed for the septic.
For the septic and the reserve.
For the septic and the reserve. There's a lot of land back there to create that kind of use. Now, the Winterwood property for us is a very big issue, not only because of the land that we'd like to have for our parking, but also for possibly a water easement because they have an incredible artesian well. Now, we also haven't explored the well that exists on the Nichewaug property. That has to be evaluated too. So the water and septic, we believe, can be resolved. There's a lot of new technology since 1985 when it comes to these kinds of services. And many of you I've walked around town and I've seen have new leach beds and new leach systems. So we need to figure that part out. The part we're at right now is does our plan make sense? Is it something the community can embrace? And what's the next step we do? Yes.
Yes. In some of the responses to questions that you just recently sent to us, one of the items states that the town presently has over $500,000 in a stabilization fund for the benefit of this property. The town needs to be prepared that some of the reserve will need to be applied to this development.
That's right.
Could you elaborate on how you can use the $500,000?
$500,000 is the money that's in reserve. That money is in reserve for a stabilization fund that was to be turned over to help tear down the place. So why don't we dig a hole and throw it in a hole? What we're saying is, as we go forward with this project, we would expect the community will get involved in this project with us. They're going to have a seat on the board. If some of that money is needed to help this project along, that is a very good investment of some of that money with a return by way of taxation. So we don't want you to think that we're coming in here with a Brinks truck. We're coming in here with knowledge and expertise and want to take this into the future. The town does have some reserves, that's public knowledge. If there's a negotiation somewhere, we want you to know, and that was why bringing this up front right from the beginning,
I'm glad you did.
that we need to be able to bring that to the table and have a conversation about it.
Right, because you're interested in using that money, and you're also interested in the town being an ongoing condo fee member for the office buildings. You're looking for the historical society to rent a condo unit.
Well, that was something somebody had suggested, they would.
That was in there, it's in the responses. And the fire trucks, you're interested in fire department.
We didn't say we were interested in it, we said that there are people, there's been some ask about the fire trucks remaining in the garage. We're not closed to that idea. There's definitely room to talk there. There's been some conversation about space for the Historical Society. We're totally open to discussing that as an option
Right,
for
but
some of that.
they would own a condo.
Everyone in there will own a condo.
Right, and they would be paying the fees.
They would
And
be,
everybody in town would then be, if the town has the office building, everybody in town would then be a condo owner.
your corporation, your town corporation would be the owner. You're just a taxpayer, so
So what I have.
in essence, you pay the town's bills, you own shares in your town, you support your existing buildings that we're sitting in right now. It's the same kind of an HOA fee that you'd be paying as if this was a condominium, you'd be still lighting it, heating it, and managing it. It'd be the same kind of
So
ownership.
as a citizen, then I could use the tennis court, or I have to be a member?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure how, again, the point with the residential owners using those facilities, that might mean that we don't have that portion of the HOA fee applied to the town's condominium. So, for example, if there's $50 a month of your homeowners association fee as a residential owner gives you membership to the health club, the town may not have that $50 fee for its office condominium use. But anybody in this room that wanted to go over and buy a membership could absolutely do that. But again, that's probably I'm glad you brought that question up, because we get into the HOA bylaws at that point.
Paul brought up the questions that we sent out to you, and just wanted to make a note for the town that those will be released to Stephen Boudreau in the next 24 or 48 hours, and we'll have it posted on the town's website, so anybody will be able to view the responses that we sent to you.
Okay. I want to, if I can, I'd like to have Mr. McNeil show you a little bit of technology on a program of how you pre-sell these kinds of condominium units, and how technology today is going to assist the brokerage community and assist the development for moving forward. So I want to give a little example of the program.
Michael, when he first got us involved with this, one of the questions he had was actually how do we pre-sell the units and how to help it. But one of the bigger questions for us was, we understand there's a great community involvement in all the projects, so how do we keep, in a very transparent way, the community involved in the project throughout the design phase, from the time we start measuring to the time actually construction starts. Today, as architects, we no longer use T-squares and trace paper. We use computers. We no longer produce necessarily CAD drawings or computer-aided drawings. We produce models, independent cyber models. And from those cyber models, we calculate the energy use, we calculate the occupancy, we calculate how much water will be used on the project, how much solar gain. But there's another thing that we can do, is we can share that. And when we share it through an open platform. We either use an ISO device, like an iPad or an iPhone, or an Android device, or your own computer. And what we enable you to do is essentially walk through the project with us as we do it. Now,
This isn't the Nichewaug.
No.
Just want to point that out, and that's not what it's going to become.
so we have iPad tonight, although
This will be available basically to anybody looking to buy a unit. What do you have available? Anybody in town wants to see what we're doing?
yeah, so from the start of design, Michael will have a website, and we'll actually be loading up the project as we go along. What you can do on the website, though, is you'll actually be able to take your finger and you'll be able to move around the project. you will at any time be able to press the button down the corner and pull up the drawings for the project. You'll be able to scan through the drawings. You'll be able to take a drawing, I'll just pick one of the blue dots, for example, and I can open that up. So you'll see the project as we develop it. You can go back to the 3D model from the drawing. You can take away the drawing. And there's something else we can do too. We can actually walk through the building. So what we actually do is press the little man down the corner and go forward, and we're going to drop onto the site. There we are on the site. This is going to be interactive all the time. So if someone wants to buy a condominium, they'll be able to walk around the entire building, they'll be able to look inside the unit, walk through the unit, see what they're going to see from their own balcony or window. You as a town will be able to see what we're doing, and you'll be able to comment on that. And I think that's a very important interactive process. So when we walk up into the building, I'm going to go a little faster. And I'm going to slow down. Okay. So when we walk around our building, we actually get to see how we maneuver in the building. And so you can do a couple things with this. One is you can actually walk up the stairs. And it does bounce as you go up the stairs. And you can walk in the room. And you can stroll around the room. I'm a little at a loss here because I'm not using my thumb. I'm going to go to the thumb now. A little better speed here. And one of the things that we can do with it is we can select a wall, and this is, we can take up the information on that wall. So in the computer system, that wall has a height, a weight, an energy, made of brick, so we know the R value of the wall. We can calculate the energy that passes through it, and we're calculating it not in some test theater, if you will. We're calculating for the actual GPS location of the building for every minute of every day, 365 days of the year. So you get a very interesting printout of what the carbon content of the building is now, the carbon content we're removing, and the carbon content we're adding, or the carbon footprint. We also get a measure of the carbon footprint in its use. So the idea being is that we're going to design the most efficient carbon footprint for this town. One of the things that we can do with that is obviously look at the water collection on the roof, take water off the roof, use gray water in the building. So it's a very interactive process, and we're going to put this out to all of you with an iPad device or a Google or home computer to walk around on the site. And you can comment on Michael on it, and Michael relays that back to us. And you can see the progress of it. And you can see the progress of the fact we can upgrade that and upload the construction process. So even if you're not allowed on the construction site for safety, you can see the components that are being built. More importantly, no matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to buy a unit in Peterson. And this technology was used 5 years ago in Oslo, in Norway. They sold out 150 units in 24 hours. One of the things when you go online, and you're walking around in it, you understand too that other people are walking around in it. So it becomes a first offer, first get. And that's a very interesting sell. There's a motivator there to buy if you're interested in it. When you view the thing, you actually start to all of a sudden the way become attached. And so I think it's very interesting. We'll model the whole site. We'll walk around the whole site. You can walk into different rooms.
This also works really well with the amenity center and with the function facility rooms and restaurants. So if you have family members that are looking to have a wedding at the Nichewaug, you'll be able to go in and actually have a virtual tour of the site. There are probably apps you can even put a decor in there, and you can design the entire room and the theme party and not do any more until you walk in the door and it's done for you. So the technology of today is so incredible that this is the wave of the future. This is how we're going to expose this to the world.
The interesting, I think, thing for us is that as architects, we're often meeting with people, and drawings, unfortunately, are language unto themselves, architectural drawings. And a lot of people just have not gotten trained to read them. They're not that complicated, but they haven't gotten trained to read them. So with this, anybody can switch back to the drawing, and they can actually understand the project without necessarily understanding a whole set of 200 pages of architectural drawings. And I think that's a very interesting component of it. And like I say, you just go back to the model at any time, and the drawing stays on the model, and you can spin it, you can zero in. It has the furnishings in it. It has all the information you need to have a really good feel of the project. And you can see the site. You can stand inside the window, look outside and see the trees. So that's part of how we're going to market this, but also how we're going to, in a very transparent way, work with it.
So, I'm curious about the timeline. I assume that if your proposal is put forward in front of the town, I'm wondering what level of detail on the project will be available prior to that vote? Will there be a site plan by then, or is what we have right now what we're going to get?
That's something that we have to all talk about, at what level we take this to, without having, how far do we go with absolutely no commitment on the part of the town? So, yeah, there's a lot of information we want you to have, but that information costs money and time. So and again, as a developer, we're trying to find the balance of how much can we, and we've invested to this point a lot of time to get to this point. How much more are we going to be able to do? I'm not sure. We've given the town a list of responsibilities that, as the seller, the town needs to do work for. So there's a gray area we haven't found yet, and I mean that by survey work, easement questions, relationships with the library and the Nichewaug, zoning. There's a list of zoning requirements. The parking, another issue. Now, to step back in the parking, for example, in my last project in Yarmouth, we did a block of buildings. What we did was we assembled the parking based on demand, not saying, well, you have a 40-seat restaurant, you need 41 parking spaces. We said, your restaurant's hours of operation are this to this, so your high demand for parking is between 5 and 7. Those kinds of negotiations have to happen. So, I guess that's all I can say. You're going to have a show. To what level we take it, I think really is to the discussions we have with the select board and how serious the town is for us to really be able to be the developer. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm interpreting it as pretty much what we have now is what we're going to get.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, without some commitment.
Well, I mean, again, we're businessmen. How much do we invest to put a presentation together to the town without having any guarantee that you may say, we're going to tear it down?
Right, but what we have right now really doesn't have much detail.
I don't really have an answer for you beyond that. I mean, what you have right now is a vacant building with a huge demolition price tag. What we're coming to you with is an opportunity, and if there's some kind of assurance with the town as we go for the next few months, of course, we're going to continue to work very hard to put the project in place. But for anybody to expect all of us to draw a set of plans on 2 walkthroughs, which is impossible, and be able to give you any more spec details than what we've only had. We've had 4 hours in the building in 6 months. In order to do a series of drawings on this building, it could take 2 weeks. We had enough trouble just getting in there for 2 hours yet today. I can't imagine if we went to the town selectmen and said we need 2 weeks to draw full-scale drawings. So again, it's about how far is the town willing to go and where do we meet in the middle. That's the answer.
The
the parking issue keeps coming up, but there's also a broader parking issue. There's almost no good parking area around the common. And for the library in particular, we're having more problems with people parking up against tree roots and all of this sort of thing. But there is space behind the parking, which is probably part of this property, the Nichewaug property. Is there any thought to having kind of a joint parking area where people could come to the library, enter through the back?
Yes.
and-
We don't want cars on the common.
Right.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, right now we do because
Right.
we don't have.
Yes, we don't want cars on the common, even for the library. We can,
Benefit both.
we want to benefit both.
Michael, I just want, just as a following up on Chris's question, you actually had answered that in one of your questions that we had asked you about how much more information the town might expect. If I could just read your answer.
I'm sorry, I don't know where you're going with this. What was the question that was asked of
Oh,
me?
I'm sorry. Chris asked, before we vote on it, would the town, the citizens have more information, a site plan and something much more developed
Right,
to vote on?
right.
And this is what you had written. The preparation of the public presentation will come with an expense. We will need to determine what amount will be the responsibility of the town, as this work will ultimately serve the town, should we not be the eventual developer. If we are the developer, all or part of this expense should be reimbursed to the town from the development of this material, as this material will become the property of the developer.
Right, and that's exactly what I said in
So
my answer.
what you're saying though is we will need to pay you for more, if you give us more information and do.
Up until right now, the town has paid a considerable amount of money to prepare 8 or 9 documents from professional teams to the tune of thousands and thousands of dollars. And they're all about the sky is falling down, you gotta tear it down, it's all doom and gloom. We are coming to you with a plan. We're not saying, write us a check and we'll give you the plan. We're saying, we need to find the gray area where we're not going to do this for free. When you pay for something, you appreciate it. Now, it's really funny because these reports that are online are heavily weighed on because you paid for them. We're not saying we want you to pay for every minute of our time. We certainly haven't done that. But I think what we have to be is realistic is once we deliver a plan, or we give any more detailed work, there is an expense associated. Hence, let's find the relationship with the town. Now, if we're the chosen developer and the town has contributed to this presentation, then absolutely we should reimburse the town out of the soft cost budget of the plan, of the project. But if we're not, well, you end up with the plan and we end up with nothing and put it into your document folio on your website and now you own it. So there's got to be a trade-off. We have to find the gray area, is what I'm trying to say.
I think the problem that we're all facing here is one of cost realism. The town doesn't want to make a determination without knowing that there's cost realism in your plan. And what I'm hearing is that cost realism costs money, and it's not obvious that you want to do it without either being reimbursed or being assured that things will go forward. So it's difficult to understand how to deal with that because we really need to know how much is it going to cost you to build this out, and so that we can, for example, calculate whether we think the price of your condominiums is appropriate for the amount of money that it's going to cost. This sort of exercise in how much it's going to cost and how realistic the finances are and the financials are that we're talking about. And I don't really see from what you're saying how to...
I don't have an answer for you on what we can actually, it's going to reassure you. Again, the town has paid a considerable amount of money to contractors to evaluate every aspect of that building to destroy it. We're not saying we're up here looking for you to pay us to give us a job and then we're gonna go away. We want to do the project. But if you think that anybody in this room, anyone of this team, could possibly give you a complete construction breakdown and analysis of this project with 4 hours of a walkthrough, that is absolutely impossible. And so there needs to be, is what I'm trying to say, is when we get to that point, there needs to be an agreement with the select board as to what everyone's going to contribute for the context of what we need to present to the town. And there needs to, and when I say everyone's got to buy in, this is a prime example that everyone in this community has to buy in on this project. Because if it's just about us, it won't work. If there's naysayers, not saying you're a naysayer, but if the naysayers out there put up the wall and we are saying, let's do it, we're not gonna go anywhere. We just have to be reassured that we're moving in the right direction and that there is a good faith on both parties to supply as much information given the information we presently have at hand. And right now, our information, other than what the RFP requested, which was, what's your thoughts? We don't have a lot of bricks and mortar measurements and drawings and cost spreadsheets to throw around the table and haggle out with you. We just don't, we're not there yet.
You know, as someone who's worked on development projects, I think everyone has to be realistic and understand their response can only be in par with their access to the building and with the access of the town resources. 100% of the town resources have gone in other directions, and 0 have gone in this direction. These people have put all of their own money into this up to this point, and like he's saying, town officials are even, not participating openly in this path, although there are 2 paths forward. So I think Michael is just kind of putting, the whole team is putting their hand out to us as a community and saying, look, you're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars as a town. You can certainly pay that, dig your hole, bury your building, haul it away to New Jersey or wherever it's going to go, or you can look at some other possibilities and meet our needs as a community. A lot of us are getting older. We would like to sell our homes. We would like to have a place to stay in town. We're new in town. There are a lot of people that have had to move out of town because there's just no place to retire. At a certain age, you want to give up maintaining your own home. You'd like to have someone do it for you. And this is a potential solution. And to hear, a small amount of people, sort of be more vocal than the rest of us as to the problems, I don't think is representative of the town. So I think it's important that those that support such a thing and those in this committee, be more engaged in this process and be more vocal. And, give the right hand of, communication to Michael and his team.
Thank you,
And
Steve.
give them the time.
Beautifully stated. It's exactly the
And
truth.
the access they need to do a professional job.
Today we were in the building for 2 hours. There's been so much myth that's been thrown around about the condition of that building. We couldn't even take any boards off the windows to get any natural light. We were looking at a building with halogen lights. Impossible for us to really do, other than a visual inspection of the structure and the space. With the bankers today, we were with brokers today. We were handicapped for a big part of that building. That's not how you're going to build this building. And so again, we're coming to you. We want to be part of the community. We want you to embrace our energy. It's either going to be all or it just can't happen. And you're right, you'll be hauling that building off to New Jersey. Yes.
I think we all ought to be ready to take the risk because of what you promise us, in a sense, you've given us a vision of what could happen. And there are always negative voices in anything worthwhile. I think this is very worthwhile. So I think we need to think in those terms of the possibilities that you put before us. And, but I think if it all comes the way it should, will benefit this town enormously.
And I'm okay with the negative and the positive, because I believe in the bell curve way of thinking. The gray area is going to surface if both sides are exposed. And even though we may feel that something may seem adverse, the benefits bring you to a place where you find a common ground and everybody really does win. Thank you.
I think, in the past, we've had a lot of single-use proposals for the building, which don't work. I think you've brought in a lot of different elements. You've got many uses that you're going to incorporate into this, which I think has the possibility of high success. And I think it also serves the needs of the community, which you're looking at. And I think the single-use proposals in the past didn't do that. Right. So I think this could be a big boom in the community.
Yes. Michael, could you talk about the zoning requirements that you would need in that building to do as well?
I gave a list of those. They're in the RFP, actually, a complete list.
But so you would want zoning residential condominium,
There's
commercial use, restaurant, liquor license, food service, entertainment use, meeting, licensed commercial kitchen, institutional uses, adult daycare, long-term respite care facility, public office condominium, human service uses, full gym, parking, and I can do some other stuff.
public place of assembly.
The zoning board to approve all those.
Those uses, not all of them are actually going to be the project that may happen when we're done. But they gave a cross-section of as-of-right uses that need to exist under zoning and deed with that property. One of the problems that every development has, no lender is going to lend you one nickel unless the building can be used for a particular purpose. And so when I wrote the RFP with my team, I outlined all of the possible uses that we identified now and in the future for that building. And so that was the comprehensive list. Because the town owns this building, the town is the applicant, not us. We will work with the town. This isn't a situation like Hayward, where an outside entity went to a private homeowner, private property owner, to buy a property, and then came to the town asking for permission for use and occupancy. In this particular relationship, the town is the property owner. The town has to make application, working with our development plan, to move their sale forward. So you're actually in a better position. We're all in a better position. It's your building. We want to develop it. There's no third party involved.
So the town then would go to its own zoning board to make that property zone for commercial uses.
Working along with us.
Long-term respite care uses. Okay.
Yes. And that's a very clean way for it to actually happen. It has to happen that way.
Michael, I'm not sure that's right. I get the concept, though. I get the concept, but...
I'm sorry, and your name is?
I'm Mary Ann.
Mary Ann. Hi, Mary Ann.
Hi. Yeah, it seems like you're raising a really good point, which is that there needs to be some advanced thinking about how the project, if it was to go forward, sort of meshes with the zoning.
Yes.
Whether the town is actually an applicant to its own zoning board, I'm not sure that that's actually...
I'm not sure in Massachusetts how that is.
But to your point that basically you want the town to be thinking about this early and sort of basically drive the process of getting you the clearance of what you want. But I just want people to be, I mean, the zoning board here in town is currently a 3-member volunteer board. I don't really envision that the town would become an applicant to the zoning board on this particular project. But that said, I'm sure that those are legal questions that somebody will look at. I was curious too, is there a liquor license that's currently available for Peter Sam? Did you check that out?
I don't know, and that's something, again, see, what we've done, Mary, is we've come to you with a plan, and so I'm not sure what uses the town is willing or capable of doing. We can't make
Of course, the liquor license isn't.
is the state, right? We can't make an application on someone's private property without some kind of a contractual relationship that we're going to buy that property or in some way a condition of sale. We're not going to make an application.
You don't have to work too hard on my question, because I sort of think
Yeah.
some of this, to Steve's point, is on the town to sort of coordinate on its end.
It was a get ready response is what it was. Like, this is what has to happen. Again, even the parking, this is what has to happen if the town would like us to move forward with our plan on behalf of the town.
There are probably reasons why there haven't been a lot of housing starts in the town. And I'm just wondering about what happens if 2 years down the road, there are only 5 or 6, a dozen units sold.
The bank isn't going to finance this unless we have a percentage of each phase committed. That's how condominium construction projects work.
Okay, so what kind of percentage do you think?
Well, in past projects, I've had to have 40% of the units under contract by qualified buyers for the bank to be willing to step forward with their phase 1 of their construction loan. The same thing with all the funding opportunities that I've outlined for you. Those are conditional on use and occupancy. So if we find in phase 1 that, now just so you know, there are about 12 people already that have identified themselves as potential buyers. And with the article that recently came out in the Athol Daily News, we got 2 responses from Florida. People who summer in New England who are looking for summer condominium ownership, and they love Peter Sam and want to be on the list. So of our 38 units, we've already had 14 people say, hey, I'm interested. So I don't think the selling of those condominium units is going to be a real difficult run, especially with technology of today. Exposing this isn't going to be like it was in the day where you had to hang the shingle outside and wait for someone to drive by. I think that we're in a much better, things are much easier. So again, they're not going to lend all the money, let us build all the units, and then sit here with a vacant done building. There's going to be conditions to the lender that they're going to require a certain amount of our diligence resolved. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to say, as a townie who has seen what's happened over there, my mother drove the girls to the academy, my father did the lawn, and I was with that small group that started the Friends of Nichewaug Inn. And it was very easy to get over 55 people to come into a room like this to say, we want something to happen. And what my concern is that I don't want us as a community to start to battle each other of what we want to do there, because small towns sometimes, I don't even like the color of your house, or I don't like your dog because you're opposed to this. We have got to come together. This to me could be an option, and it will be only an option if we can start to open our hearts to listen to this. So I just want to offer that, because I'm a townie who may want to get one of those condominiums rather than live in an 8-room house that I want to narrow down. So thank you.
Thank you. The other thing too, part of that article that came out in Athol Daily News, it connected us with one of the people who's organized an alumni get-together of some of the past parochial school students. And they are in Connecticut this weekend at a big reunion. And so I've talked with them and said, round up your troops and let's get everybody together and let's, maybe put a fundraiser together. Maybe you can be a benefactor to a part of the project. They're gonna contact Michelle, and I turned them on to Michelle because that's where she wants to get focused. Again, community working with community. Here's a group of people who went to school there in the 1960s who are having a meeting in Connecticut who are worried about their old school and how they can help. So when you reach out, you never know what gifts are going to come.
I only thought of this question from something Larry said, but I may as well throw it out there because I know nothing about condo associations. Would that be a pet-friendly place that people who purchase in could bring their existing pets?
Typically in a homeowners association, there are conditions for types of pets that are allowed. I mean, if you want to bring in your pet snake, you might not be able to do that. But, but if you have a cat, I mean, again, it also depends on what part of the building you live in. Now, I don't know, I'm not going to actually sit there and, I'm not personally going to write the homeowners association bylaws. They're going to be written by the team, made up of a cross-section of people who talk about these kinds of issues.
But would people know the answers to these questions
Yeah,
before
well,
they buy in?
before you'd even buy a unit, actually, when you make an offer on a condominium association space, the master deed and the condo documents are already in place. And so those, typically the realtor supplies the offeree with the master deed and condo documents, and there's a review period. So it would say to you, yes, you can have a dog under 25 pounds, this is the walking zone, this is what you can do, blah, 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 all those things are outlined, yes. But you would know that prior to buying a unit, absolutely.
Do you have an idea of the timeline and financial commitments by the various parties to get to the point where you could go to the bank?
From what we're understanding, this is our interview night. This committee is going to make a recommendation to the select board. The select board is going to call discussion on this sometime late August or September. At that point, I think you're going to then, we're going to either be here to give you a show, and you're going to have a decision. Go with our plan, abate a building, leave it alone, or tear it down and abate it. That's going to be the decision. If you decide at that point to go with our plan, then we go into the zoning aspect and the conditions that have been outlined in the RFP that are going to take the time. So ideally, if we were ready to convey the property by early spring of next year, construction could begin relatively quickly, and so then we would be looking at 18 to 24 months before the project would be finalized. So
Based on your experience, do you know what the financial commitment would be from the various parties to get to that point?
no, I don't have the answer right now, today, no. There's too many variables for me to even look at. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for funding that we need to look at. There's opportunities with the bank, partnering with the bank, different relationships with different lenders, investor groups, town participation. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, so I don't have an answer to that today, no.
What about what you did in other projects?
It was the same process where I had to get to the point where I had the zoning, get the building, acquire the building, get the development money, and that would take, like for example, our project in Yarmouth took 2 years before we were actually under construction once all approvals and lendings were in place. So in this particular case, realistically, I don't think that we could actually break ground on this project until sometime spring of next year, and that's given an aggressive approach from the zoning board of appeals. So you still got some time, but we think we've got a good plan.
What about the financials of the monster? Is that something you could get clear about?
Part of all this, it makes it a very attractive place for people to come and explore the region. I'm in the process right now of constructing a 2.5-mile trail from Harvard Forest to Harvard Pond and Swamp area.
Okay.
This is all part of a greater vision. This could fit in very nicely with the kind of work you're doing to make available places for people to come and stay and spend some time in the region, or maybe use our trails too of the town.
And so what I'm hearing from that is somewhere in this plan is a pot of gold that could be earmarked for part, and that's exactly the kind of process that has to happen.
And you might qualify for federal.
That's why I wrote that down, plan of tourism.
We've got a few more questions to go here. We're going to start winding down. Sheila, I think you had your hand up for one.
Yeah, I just have one question. I just want to go back to the town office space that you're offering. So you're offering 5,000 square feet. Is that correct?
That's what was asked.
Okay, and then the town has to pay to retrofit it.
Right.
And then the town is a condominium owner then?
Yes.
And so then the town has to pay a fee?
The town would pay the HOA fee, the homeowners association fee, would be related to expenses for that particular property. If it includes the utilities, the HOA fee would bill the town for its percentage of ownership. If there were the parking to be maintained, anything that's related to services, just like, you don't see it, but you pay fees to manage the buildings we're sitting in. Well, in this particular case, that fee would be shared by everyone, so it would be considerably less. But you'd still get...
How much it would be?
Well, again, the budget for the homeowners association hasn't even been discussed yet, but it would be based on operating costs and also replacement costs. So for example, if the roof needs to be replaced in 20 years, a small portion of that HOA monthly fee goes into the reserve. So when your part of the building needs a new roof, the money's already in place and it's handled for you. So that's the beauty of having as a condominium. The grass is cut, the snow's plowed, everything's handled for you.